This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We're back for Q&A 23.
23.
Yeah, pretty wild. I don't know anything cool about the number 23, but...
No, the only thing I can think of is 23 and Me.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that like the DNA company thing? It's not a paid advertisement.
Not a paid advertisement. It's just the only thing that I think of when I think of the number 23.
Yeah, fair enough. So, Kate, you get to start us off this time with the first one, which is, I think, the shortest.
I was going to say short and sweet.
Yes, it
Wait,
is.
Did you do that thing again where they just get progressively longer?
I think that's how this worked out. I mean, like we've said before, I just put them in
order.
Yeah, in order of how we receive them. But yes, it happens to be shortest, and then I think the rest get longer as we go.
That's funny. Oh, well. All right. So this one, short but sweet, just says, my boss gave me constructive criticism that I don't agree with. How can I cope?
Yeah. So, I mean, like with a lot of things with some of the posts that we get in the Facebook group or emails that listeners write to us, there's a lot that we don't know here, right? We don't know what the criticism was. We did not witness this exchange between this listener and the listener's boss. We don't really know what happened here. And I certainly do not want to be condoning any type of behavior that could have been abusive on the part of this listener's boss, because we don't know what was said or how it was said. And it's possible it was completely out of line and completely not okay. There's totally that possibility. But I'm going to assume, hopefully, that it was not delivered in an abusive manner, and that hopefully it truly was, as the listener wrote, constructive criticism. Keyword there being constructive. Even if it was hard to hear, which I think that could be a pretty universal experience that we've all had, is somebody giving us some feedback that was hard to digest and take in. So I don't know. I kind of come back to this idea of dialectics and trying to see if there is sort of a nugget of truth, anything that your boss might have said that you do agree with, or that you can see your boss's perspective on. And this can be really hard sometimes, but through the lens of dialectics, basically a dialectical perspective here would be saying that there is probably some truth to your experience and some truth to your boss's experience. And how do we find that? And it can be really hard to do this with people in general who have opposing viewpoints from us and who have different values than us and who believe things that we don't believe, to try to figure out where's the common ground here, or where can I agree with them on something, even if I disagree with 9 out of 10 things that they just said. But that would probably be the first thing that I would recommend, is that if you can find some part of what your boss said where you can understand where your boss is coming from, that can really help diffuse the situation. And if you had a really strong emotional reaction upon hearing this criticism, it might help temper that and basically lead to you hopefully being less emotionally reactive if you were in the moment when this criticism was delivered. If it truly feels like the criticism was really unfair. Like, was not based in anything. You cannot find any merit to whatever your boss said. You can consider using fast skills here if you wanted to revisit this with your boss and talk through what your boss said. So, of course, with the principles of fast, trying to be fair to both of you, not apologizing, sticking to your values, and being truthful. You can try to use some of those principles in a second conversation, especially to really explain how it felt to receive this criticism. Not even necessarily about you're saying I did X, Y, and Z wrong, but I don't think I did do X, Y, and Z wrong. That might not get you super far, but at least to maybe explain, this is why this didn't sit well with me. This is why I'm struggling to understand where you're coming from. This is what I don't agree with. Fast would probably be the DBT skill of choice if you did decide to talk about this further with your boss. And the reason why I recommend that it might be good to use fast skills to talk about how the initial criticism was delivered rather than the criticism itself is because, I don't know, I'm kind of the belief, not always, again, sometimes some really horrible, awful things are said, and it doesn't matter how nicely they're delivered, they are horrible, awful things. Just, there's no two ways around it. That happens. But sometimes also, I think what can happen in situations like this is that it's maybe the delivery more than what was actually delivered. That if your boss had addressed this with you differently, saying the same thing or giving you the same feedback but done in a different way, perhaps that could have made a difference. And that may be the best thing to approach and try to find some common ground on. So that the next time your boss might have some criticism to tell you, it feels different than it felt this time. So those are my thoughts. How about you, Kate?
Well, it wouldn't be a Q&A episode if I didn't start off with talking about self-soothing.
Right off the top. First one.
But I do think, I don't know, I would guess I was thinking about this in a couple of different ways, in a little bit of a cascade or timeline kind of thing, because, I don't know, I definitely have had my issues with authority. I know on a few occasions, Michelle and I have talked about the boss that we shared in community mental health, and God love her. She scared me sometimes. Yep. She was a very powerful and intimidating lady. Which is hilarious because she came up to my chin. So it was not a physical but somehow still physically intimidating, wasn't she?
I know.
Short really lady, was. Mighty presence. Yes. But there were definitely meetings that she and I had where I could have used, and to an extent did use, some self-soothe skills afterwards because, I just was very, especially having come from, my abusive childhood and stuff like that, being taken down by authority figures was, taken down a peg. Could be really triggering for me. So the first thing I thought about is just trying to bring your nervous system back to some sort of semblance of homeostasis immediately after, right? Yeah. Dealing with that criticism that might have landed really poorly. There's so many different ways I don't agree with it could feel, right? You're pissed about it, or you're hurt by it, or you're confused, or whatever. But either way, just sort of trying to come back to an amount of baseline before trying anything else. Is the first thing that came to my mind in situations like that. I'm also a fan of check the facts. Again, sometimes I get the feeling that as written, DBT kind of expects you to prove yourself wrong through check the facts, but I like that it can go either way. I know Michelle and I talk about that a lot, but it can be nice to look through just for so many different things, right? Maybe you find that the actual criticism was more accurate than it originally felt. You could do it on that sort of line. Or less accurate than it felt. Also, it could be about, are you catastrophizing about what it means that your boss has this criticism of you, right? Oh, they're going to fire me. They hate me. So it can help you maybe tone down some catastrophic thinking if that's something going on for you. Anyway, I think there's a lot of ways that check the facts can be helpful in a situation like that. And then I knew from looking at what Michelle was putting in her notes that she was talking about the sort of the dialectics and the finding the truth in what someone else said, or, you know, maybe discovering more truth in what they said. So I thought I'd balance out on the other side of it. And, you know, not related to DBT at all, but just say that no one has a monopoly on reality. No one has a monopoly on truth, right? And so, well, there you go. That's funny. It actually is coming back to a dialectic, right? Mm-hmm. To an extent. It's just, maybe you don't agree with it because it's not true. Because it's not real. Because it's not a accurate reflection. If we go back to that same boss, she repeatedly had the criticism of me that I laughed way too much with my clients during session. Right? I was too jovial, too jocular, too much laughter, just not right. Not good. Bad Kate. Bad therapist. She wasn't wrong that I laughed a lot. The literal fact of the matter of how much I was laughing was not in contention. I agreed with her about how much I laughed. But it, you know, turns out that how much I laugh and how much I make my clients laugh is now one of my biggest selling points in my private practice, right? So it was an accurate reflection of reality, but maybe not an accurate criticism, because it was one of the things that, to me and my current clients, at least positively set me apart, right? So there's so many different ways that this can get approached. And the first thing I guess in order, the first thing I think about is just chill your nervous system down a little bit. Hey, I go to self-soothe, but if you're really, really, really over the top, tip, maybe. Not over the top, like flipped your lid. Isn't that the way that Dan Siegel talks about it with mindfulness?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
When you flip your lid. Anyway, so just, right, help yourself come to a place where you're feeling more emotionally stable. And then just do some evaluating, right? Michelle talked about different ways to evaluate it. I'm talking about different ways to evaluate it. But basically just check in with yourself and with the situation and with the facts. And, you know, after that, there's a lot of different ways you can go forward. Ignoring it, engaging with it, accepting it, trying to, you know, re-engage with your boss about it. There's a lot of paths forward, but I think finding a place of relative calm first is a good first step. So that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, totally. Okay. This next one says, a spot just opened up for my 15-year-old daughter in a DBT program that we've been waiting months for. She is self-harming, has suicidal ideation, and has been hospitalized twice in the past 3 months. The problem is it's all online. Skills training, group work, family therapy, individual therapy, and med management. Excuse me. It's a tongue twister. Zoom calls are one of her biggest stressors right now. She's able to meet face-to-face with her current therapist and is making slow progress, but there's no DBT or skills training involved. So my question is, does anyone have any experience or insight into the effectiveness and quality of intensive DBT online? She desperately needs these skills and wants the help, but we're all very concerned that the format will be more of a hindrance than a help.
Well, that's a rough situation. So first of all, I don't know, I think we've said this a few times, and I think I'll probably continue to say it every time. I always get the warm, fuzzy feels when parents write in or are in the in the Facebook group and are obviously trying really hard for their kiddos to take care of them, to get them the treatment that they need. Anyway, so good job, parental human. Is the first thing. The second thing I think about is be really open with the leader of the group. In so many different ways, they may be able to offer additional support to her, right? Skills that may help her get more comfortable as she goes. There can be ways to talk about specific stressors in advance and maybe try and brainstorm ways to ease or cope with those aspects. Honestly, the first thing I think about, because I don't know about for you, Michelle, but for a ton of my clients, when we made the shift to doing telehealth video counseling, a lot of people were really bothered by seeing themselves, right? That can cause, I have a lot of trans clients, and dysphoria can come up a lot, right? Just body image issues can come up a lot. Anyway, there's a lot of reasons that people have a hard time looking at themselves, right? So finding ways to hide self-view or put something over the picture of themselves on the screen or something like that, right? So there's, I don't know, I just keep coming back to this, really engage with, of course, I say leader of the group, but it sounds like there's a whole lot going on in this program. So,
Yeah.
being open with all of them, right? The group leader, the family therapist, the individual therapist, the prescriber, whoever that is, whoever's involved in it. Because, I don't know, I think when Michelle and I lead groups, we try and be really open and receptive to people having unique needs and struggles, and trying to work both just in and of ourselves to come up with ways to help those things, and trying to be, a resource and a touchstone and someone that person can turn to, because we know they have that problem. So, yeah, I think that, I don't know, I don't have any experience with intensive DBT online. Michelle and I have now run a full year?
More than a year.
2 years? Is it 2 full cycles now? Anyway, whatever. Almost. Yeah. We've run a lot of DBT online since the pandemic started. And it's definitely different than in person. But I think that as she and I have, well, I was going to say perfected, but I don't think we're at perfect yet. As we've honed our online DBT leading skills, I think it's gotten better and more effective. So there's definitely pluses and minuses. And I would just say try and be really on top of informing the different care providers involved, because you might be surprised at how much they can help.
Mm-hmm. Yep, totally. Kind of building off of what Kate was just saying in terms of pluses and minuses. I mean, pluses and minuses are going to be different for each individual. And some of this may be, I don't know, things you've already thought about or may not apply to your daughter. But some of the general, kind of pros and cons that I have seen with us leading groups virtually, one of the really good things is that I think people have less excuses to not go. You're at home. Mm-hmm. It's about as accessible as it can be, because you don't have to leave your house. So we don't get people, running as late to groups because they're not sitting in traffic and things like that. Also, with being at home, you may have some coping things there. Right? So your daughter, let's say she wants to be in her pajamas and have a blanket over her and, I don't know, be drinking her favorite tea while she does group. She could do all that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're going into an office setting, sure, they may have some things around to help with coping, but it's just not going to be personalized. And when you're at home, you can access a whole lot of other things that may make it easier to do what's being asked within the DBT program. But of course, right, downsides in general, people are more distracted when they're at home. You have pets in the background. It can be really tempting. We've had to explicitly say it in our groups of do not be looking at other screens on your computer, because people get really tempted to have lots of tabs open, and we can kind of tell that they're not really watching us. Yeah. And it can be harder to connect with other people in the group because you're not all in the same room together. So maybe some of that applies to your daughter, maybe some of that doesn't. But I think it would be really important, if you and her have not already had a conversation, what are her own pluses and minuses, right? You mentioned that this is something she's really struggled with doing Zoom calls. What is it specifically about the Zoom call that she doesn't like? And Kate was already touching on some really good things for how to address if it just makes her self-conscious. There's certainly things that can be done about that. But what is it? What makes it hard for her, and really trying to brainstorm? Because my hope is that you can find some things that are pros for her. I talked about some really general, broad pros and cons right there, but my hope is that you guys might be able to find something that could make it a positive experience being virtual, and then trying to really address and combat, also, like Kate was saying, with the help of the people in this DBT program, getting them involved and collaborating with them of this is what she doesn't like. This is what she's worried about, and then how to help ease those worries. Because overall, listener, my takeaway from this is that a virtual group is better than no group. A virtual DBT program is better than no DBT program. And Things have really fluctuated and changed throughout the entire course of this pandemic in terms of what's being offered. Some people might be offering in-person groups again. And hey, if you can find an in-person DBT program in your area, by all means, take it. But a lot of things are still virtual. And so that's my 2 cents, is that virtual is better than nothing. And hopefully down the line, if let's say she does do this virtual DBT program and she really doesn't get a lot out of it, like it's just really difficult for her. Maybe she shows up, but again, the stress of it all really weighs on her. Hopefully down the line at some point, like maybe sometime next year or something, then you might be able to get her into an in-person group later. But this may be your best bet for now. So I would take it. And I think what Kate and I are both saying is just really trying to get creative with addressing the aspects of virtual that make her uncomfortable and stressed out.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. On to the next one. This one says, "Hey guys, I need some advice. I have not been doing too great recently, and by not great, I mean I've had 3 separate mental health professionals recommend I go to an inpatient DBT clinic. The problem is, I'm putting myself through nursing school, and this program doesn't allow me to take a few months off. I won't be able to postpone and graduate a year later. It's complicated. I'm an American student studying nursing in Germany. So I'm stuck between my certification as a nurse and my mental health, and could really use some words of advice."
Yeah. So I was trying to think back because as we've named in some recent Q&As, Kate and I are really behind with recording these episodes. So this was posted quite a while ago. I did post a response to this listener who had put this up in the Facebook group. And if my memory serves me well, the listener did ultimately decide to keep pursuing the nurse certification, but my memory could be really foggy there. So listener, I apologize if I can't remember off the top of my head what happened, but I just want to speak really generally, because this listener has some specific circumstances that kind of complicate the situation. But in general, this is not an uncommon thing. I think especially for people who are students and going to school, and a lot of times going to school and working.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people struggle with this when they find themselves in an academic program where they're stressed and they are overwhelmed and their mental health starts to suffer. And so I really want to kind of address this really broadly because lots of people find themselves in that boat. So the first thing that I tend to recommend, which can be hard enough on its own, is this idea of cutting back. So like this listener mentioned, cutting back for, I believe this listener was female, can't recall though, but cutting back in terms of like taking a few months off was not really a possibility for her. It was one of those things where it was kind of all or nothing, but there are many academic programs where you can hopefully cut back. I.e., instead of taking 3 classes the next quarter, take maybe only 1 or 2, kind of an idea. And that's typically the first thing that I recommend, is to try to scale back how much you're doing. Now, not all programs are like that. Again, I remember in my grad program for my master's degree, I mean, it was mapped out for us from day 1. And if you veered off from that schedule, it was definitely going to delay you graduating, probably by a year. And those are big stakes. So I want to validate that there can be a lot on the line here. But if you have options like that within your academic program, meet with an advisor, see if there's any flexibility or wiggle room for you to do less. And noticing how that would feel. Because what happens a lot is that people try to keep going at the same pace they've been going at. And things honestly kind of implode. Like something really major winds up happening. Sometimes they wind up getting extremely physically ill. Sometimes this can look like a suicide attempt. I mean, this can look all sorts of ways if people continue trying to go at full steam, even though there's lots of signs pointing to you need a break. You need to slow down. This is too much. If you're not listening to those warning signals, things can really go off the rails, and then you are forced to completely drop out or something like that. So it's better to step away or to step back sooner than to keep going at full speed. And none of that is easy. Those are not easy decisions to make. And I thought about it in terms of DBT because I don't know if I really talked about this in our willingness versus willfulness episode, but I'll just say that for me, a lot of times willfulness looks like I do not slow down. I don't cut back on what I need to do. I try to fit everything in. I try to just keep going. Like, that's what willfulness looks like a lot of times for me. I ignore signs that say, I don't know, let's say I'm starting to just feel like physically sick. And, you know, I'm facing that choice between, do I take a day off work or do I go in? And willfulness for me looks like I'm going in. I can't take a day off, which Kate has seen me do this firsthand. So honestly, recognizing, you know what, I am struggling. I need to take a step back. I need to change direction. I need to do something different, at least for the time being, so that I can get back on track. That to me is truly practicing willingness. And it's hard when the stakes are really high, where it's like, this could delay me launching into my career. You know, that's very hard at the time to make those decisions and to make that call. But in the long run, it tends to be best. It does. So lots of empathy for this listener in particular, and for any listener who finds himself in this boat of, I'm super busy, especially academically, and I'm burning out and I'm struggling. Yep. Trying to find some way to cut back is what I generally recommend for your mental health. Yeah.
I like it. And I'll echo similar to that at the end of my stuff. But the first thing I just wanted to say is, I don't know, all of the empathy. I went through a period of time when I was in grad school where I was really struggling with my mental health. It wasn't, I don't think this listener specifies how much of their mental health stuff is school related. Mine wasn't much, if at all. But it happened at the same time as I was in grad school. And I just remember really struggling with that and trying to figure it out for myself. For me in particular, being in school for being a therapist, that was when I was having to do the most to reconcile the idea that I could have mental health issues and still be a therapist without feeling like a hypocrite. So that's about the way that school contributed to it for me, was just I'm pretty close to having a nervous breakdown, and I think I'm going to tell other people how to be more mentally healthy. And so that took me a while to figure out my way of reconciling those ideas. So just first of all, just, I don't know, a lot of both empathy and sympathy. It's a hard boat to be in for all of the reasons that you were naming, Michelle. Thinking about DBT skills specifically, well, I don't know, maybe my superpower is finding a way that self-soothe is applicable to everything. But I don't know, I think of, on average, the more tender DBT things, or gentle, maybe, tender or gentle. So self-soothe is definitely one of my favorites. Also, a lot of the things of accepts can be really gentle. Right? Ways of distracting yourself perhaps from some of the stressors that you're under, taking breaks. Right? One of the things that separates accepts from just general procrastination is that you're engaging with something deliberately, right? You're doing it consciously, with mindfulness, right? You're really in it. And little breaks like that in the midst of studying or working or other things like that can actually be enormously beneficial. Even if it's just like I don't know, every hour I'm going to take 5 minutes to work on my Sudoku puzzle or whatever. Right. So accepts, I think, can also be really useful in prolonged periods of struggle. And then more generally, non-DBT, what I wrote down in my notes is what feeds you, what drains you, and what can be dropped. And I think it's just, what I mean by that is to do an inventory, I guess, right? Really look at what is present in your life right now. And that can be things that are literally just every single day, or things that are more generally true, weekly or monthly or whatever. Just look at your environment. Look at who you're interacting with and what you're doing. And try and sort things into that, what feeds you or what drains you, and then also what can be dropped. So some of this might look like what Michelle is talking about, which is literally cutting back on school, right? Trying to have fewer burdens in that regard, trying to slow down a little bit, trying to push yourself a little bit less hard. But I think of this as also just applying to your life as a whole, right? If you're in a situation where for whatever reason, like this person is the thing where they're in Germany, you can't cut back on some of these bigger things, these more obvious things. What can you cut? So for instance, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, but does it actually matter if you don't dust for a few months? Probably not.
I was going to say, Kate, you're speaking to me because I've been looking around my house lately thinking I need to dust, which is my least favorite chore.
It's the worst. Right? Does it actually matter? As long as I can eat, does it actually matter if I only do the dishes once a week? Or less often? I don't know how many dishes you have. Right?
Can I let go of home-cooked meals and maybe order takeout once or twice a week?
Right? Yeah. Can I be a little bit less stringent about making sure I get in to visit Aunt Jo every month, right? So especially with eyes on what drains you, right? When you've done the first, what feeds you and what drains you, especially looking at the what drains you list. What can be dropped temporarily or severely cut back with, if you can't drop it entirely. And then if you look at the what feeds you list in your current life, and it's, real short. If there's not a lot in that column when you're doing your sorting, that also can be a place to look. What can you add, right? If you think about times in the past where you felt more nourished, what was different then? What showed up more in your life at that time that helped you feel, fed, nourished, supported, present, energetic? What can you add into that category? Especially if suddenly you have more time because you've dropped a bunch of shit in the what drains you category. So, I don't know, just really generally speaking, and I think this can go to things around school and work and family and almost any time people are having a really hard time, is just look at, what feeds you, what drains you, and what can be dropped, and trying to, as much as possible, bare minimum, try and have the what feeds you and what drains you columns be equal. If you can. Awesome is the life where the what feeds you category is a lot longer, but that can be really hard to achieve depending on your circumstances. But if nothing else, in all probability, it will be very validating to go through the exercise. You're like, I can't figure out why I feel like shit. And then you do that and you're like, oh, I engage in 2 things that feed me and 50 things that drain me. Maybe the fact that I'm exhausted and miserable makes sense.
Yeah.
So, anyway, those are my thoughts.
I like those 3 prompting questions. Those are good.
Thanks.
Okay, last one here. And this one is pretty long, but we wanted to leave it in because there's probably various aspects of this that will resonate for people. So this one says, I'm reaching out because I need help. I've been feeling very insignificant lately. Most of my friends have moved away and they don't visit anymore. The rest are always busy and often cancel plans. My family is busy all the time too. I literally had to go and meet my mom at a market stall on the weekend for 5 minutes in order to see her at all for the whole month, basically because she's so busy. I got rejected from a leadership program at work, and that was the only thing I had left to look forward to in my job. Most of my workmates have left, so I spend most days alone. I get home from work and my partner is already drunk and pretending he's not. I say nothing, just go and lie down. He asks if I'm okay, I say no, and he pats my shoulder and walks away. I posted a status on Facebook yesterday just saying help because I worried about myself for a minute when driving home and I had no idea who to turn to. I got a few messages in response, mostly saying they are here for me if I need to talk, but one in particular mentioned my beautiful baby boy, and now I feel worse for even thinking thoughts about disappearing because how could I do that to him? I was just on my way to work this morning and nearly got cleaned up by a garbage truck, then had a panic attack in the car. I'm just not coping well at all, and aside from contacting my general practitioner for a mental health care plan, I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to be driving to the state capitol tonight after work to meet my partner and his boss for dinner and drinks because he's working towards a promotion, then traveling with my partner to a small town where his best friend lives and spending a couple days there. So, how do I get through these next few days before I can get to my doctor and sort things out? My partner is oblivious to the extent of my troubles, but I can't exactly bring them up just yet as I have a role to play in being the supportive partner for him first. Please, somebody help me. I don't want to break.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're, as you know, we were saying about the one before that, is, you know, the actual situation has been long past because this was in the Facebook group as well. But still, just listening to you read that just makes my, I don't know, makes my heart hurt for that person. That's so much to be going through. It's a lot of hard shit and a whole lot of not support.
Yeah.
So let's see how many different things. I don't know. So I try and be pretty transparent about stuff. When I hear I can't tell my partner about how bad my troubles are because I have this role of playing and being the supportive partner for him first, I will admit that I get mad. I'm like, nuh-uh, you're not second important. That's not... Your mental health and well-being is not less important than, I don't know, him being oblivious to ideally make him do better at trying to get his promotion. I don't know. So anyway, I got my hackles up for that because I wanted to defend this person to themselves about their own importance. But when I think about, just generally speaking, if someone is in a space similar to this, there were a few things that came to my mind as potential action points or pieces of advice. One of them is to focus your energy in places where you're getting something back. A lot of what I heard over the course of this person's post is that there's a lot of their friends, their family, work, there's a lot of places where their partnership, where they're putting in energy and don't seem to be getting any back, right? Friends are busy or canceled. Family is busy. Partner is drunk and oblivious, right? Job, no one's around and I'm not advancing anyway. So there's a lot of, putting out and not a lot of coming back at that person. So I don't know what these places might be for this particular listener. Sadly, none of the things they mentioned seem to fall into that category, but I would highly, highly recommend trying to find something, somewhere where you're getting something back. That's a place where you can really focus your attentions. This could be a relationship. This could be a hobby. This could be a project. This could be some things that might not traditionally seem like they're giving back, but they're giving back through satisfaction, through gratification, through pleasure or enjoyment, right? To sort of echo what I was saying in response to the last post is, right, what feeds you and what drains you. And this person just sounds like they've got drain after drain after drain after drain after drain after drain after drain. And I just want to know what feeds them. And I hope for them the ability to focus more there, right? I don't know how good these friendships have been previously, so I'm not necessarily advocating to just be like, well, you guys are too busy and ignore me too much, I'm done with you forever. But maybe less time, right? Trying to reach out to them, less effort in trying to make plans right now when they're so inaccessible. You might be able to, what is the word I'm looking for? Communicate. There you go. You might, depending on the friendship, be able to communicate that directly. Like, hey, I know you've been super busy. But it can be a real drain on me to try and make plans with you repeatedly when I don't know what your availability is like. So, hey, I'm here. I want to see you. Can you please reach out to me when you think you actually have space and time for us to do something, right? Like, be obvious about it, but for the relationships you're wanting to keep, maybe put the ball openly in their court, right? So you can maybe cut back on the energy expenditures there without cutting back on the relationships or connections themselves. Now, if you're looking at all of these relationships and it turns out that other than being busy, they also suck, maybe, either way, actually, maybe, it might be time to look for some new connections if old relationships aren't providing much for you. This could also be found through a hobby or through, there's lots of different places and ways to meet folks. I think we even have a whole episode on making friends. So maybe go find that out, but don't be afraid to try and find new connections if old connections aren't serving you, I guess is what I'm thinking of with that one. For this person in particular and anybody else listening who might have been like, oh yeah, I feel that one. I just want to gently suggest assessing the partnership itself. I know this is a, 2-paragraph Facebook post. It cannot possibly encompass the totality of the relationship and the complexities thereof, but think about it. Yeah. I don't, as the little snippet that we see in this post, it doesn't sound like that partnership is really, feeding this listener or nourishing them, or supporting them. So something also maybe worth looking at. We can feel so tied to the things that already exist because there's such a fear of letting those go and finding that there's nothing to replace them. But the other side of that is while you're holding on to all of these things that don't serve you, really how much time, attention, or energy do you have, or space do you have for anything else? Right? Sometimes by clearing out these connections that are unhealthy or don't serve us, we're actually just making space for something else that can and will to actually be in our lives. And you can think of that as woo-woo or not woo-woo as you like. Depending on what fits for you. And then because I feel slightly compulsive about including some sort of DBT skill in every response I have, the thing I thought about was mostly the A's, but ABC, accumulating positive life experiences. It just is this idea of, again, doesn't sound like this person has much that's nourishing them. And ABC on whole, I think, does a good job of speaking to different ways that someone might find that they can be nourished. Mm-hmm. All right, That's me. What about you, Michelle?
I second a lot of what you said. Because I too saw the similarities between this listener and the one just before.
Yep.
I mean, life circumstances, very different, but I think kind of the theme in both of those posts, or this one I think was an email, but that in what both of these listeners said is essentially, I am getting really burnt out from my current life.
Yeah.
I am getting really run down. I feel like I have to keep going, but I don't know how to keep going. That's the underlying message here. So you spoke to it really nicely, and I'll just second what you said of, really looking at what are the areas where you can cut back if possible. And you pointed it out really nicely too, Kate, that it really does sound like this listener has a lot of things draining them. So you got to find those things to tip the scale, like you were talking about to the last listener, of what feeds you also, and really, trying to figure out what it would look like to have some space or time and energy to pour into that. I also picked up on the same thing about playing the role of the supportive partner first.
It's almost like we're both therapists or something.
Yeah. Or that I'll speak for myself, where I have been in that role in a past relationship. Yes. Yep. So that stood out to me because I remember what that felt like when I was in a relationship, for 8 years, where that's what I did.
Yep.
Putting his needs first and just trying to be that good partner. And it doesn't get us anywhere. And I think kind of when I initially responded to this listener, I think I had really said something. Oh, yeah, this was in the Facebook group now that I remember. But I think I really said something like, is there any way you can get out of this weekend?
Yeah.
Like, is there any part of this weekend that you maybe choose to not participate in? Anything. Because, again, I just really think it comes back to figuring out that balance of, am I doing these things because I want to do them, or am I doing these things out of obligation? Don't get me wrong. We all have things in life that we do out of obligation.
Yep.
Once we're done podcasting today, I'm going to go finish cleaning my house. I have to clean my house. I don't want to, but the house needs to be cleaned. So I'm going to go do it, right? It's purely out of obligation, but I think it really goes back to kind of that scale idea. If you are doing the vast majority of things in your life out of obligation, that's not a way to live. We want it to be that the list of things you're doing because you have to is hopefully much smaller than the list of things you're doing because you want to, as Kate said, because they feed you, because they bring you joy. We want that list to be longer. And, yeah, sometimes that can look like taking things off of the obligations list. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it looks like, as Kate was saying, adding things on to the list of things that feed you and just trying to make that list longer. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I was just sensing the same thing. And, you know, it's hard to sometimes read these posts and I can just really feel, though I don't know anything about these listeners, I just feel like, ooh, you're heading down a path that isn't good. I just feel it. And I don't know what the not good looks like or how that pans out for each particular listener, but I could just really sense it with this one of like, oh man, we got to change something really soon here, because you've already been going like this for a long time. And again, it's burning you out. It's wearing you down. We got to mix it up. Yep. I don't want to break. Yeah. That's how this post ends. So, in terms of the DBT skill that I thought of, Kate mentioned ABC, which I think is a great skill here. I also thought of improve. I think the reason why I thought of improve instead of accepts is because my sense reading this listener's post is that accepts might be a bit of a high bar to set here, right? Because with accepts, we're asking you to specifically kind of pause what you're doing and make space in your life to do an activity, to contribute. Some of the things with accepts are not so doing based, but some of them are. And hey, if that you think would be helpful for you, listener, by all means, great. But the thing that I really like about improve is that you can do the aspects of improve while kind of going through your normal life, if that makes sense. You're just hopefully doing things in a different way, right? If you're able to find ways to encourage yourself while you're doing something, if you're able to find meaning in what you're doing, if you're able to use some imagery, these are things that can be pretty accessible and can hopefully help shift where your thoughts are going, which Kate, also, you said this pretty appropriately, which is like the thoughts going towards other people or the lack thereof in this listener's life, and really making sure that your mental space is being used to try to be there and show up for yourself in the ways that you might need it. And again, doing some of these things from improve can really help you prioritize yourself a little bit more, even if outwardly you're not doing much different in your life. The internal experience might shift and change. So
I like that one.
Yeah.
All right, that was our last one.
Yes.
That was that. So keep writing us either in the Facebook group or DBT Me Podcast at gmail.com. Right. Send us emails, write posts in the Facebook group. We'll get to them, we swear, eventually. And
yeah. And we do try to respond, like, I would say in a relatively timely manner, like replying to emails, replying to Facebook posts, and we'll actively address it on a Q&A.
down the line.
Point. Yep.
So here's, it was good. And yeah, here's to hopefully talking to you guys in Q&A 24 soon.
Yes, exactly. All right.
All right,
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT